speak should indicate using raising their hand in Microsoft Teams. Please remember to unmute your microphone and switch on your video feed when it's your turn to speak. Speak clearly and slowly into your microphone. If you do not have the hand button, please just type the request to speak in the chat box, or alternatively just switch your camera on and we'll know that you'll want to speak. And finally, can I ask everyone's patience for the use of the technology, and hopefully we don't have any issues tonight, and but we'll sort them out if we do. So thank you all very much for that. So first item then is to receive any apologies, please, Karen.
Yes, Chair. Apologies received from Mr. Keeley, Mr. Christophorou, Mr. Rowe, Mrs. Mann, Mr. McConaughey, Miss Middleton, Helen Ellis, Jeremy Keeble and Mr. Reid. And also Rob Dunn, he will be attending but will be 30 minutes late. Okay, thank you for that. And do we have any substitutes this evening? No substitutes, Chair. Thank you. So item 5 then is to approve as a correct record the minutes of the meeting held on the 2nd of March, which I'm hoping everybody's had chance to read. If we can just take them for accuracy then, first of all. So page 37, 38, 39, 40, 41, 42, 43, 44 and 45. Okay, thank you. So do we have any matters arising? So we'll go back to the beginning. Anything on page 37? Page 38, so under item 52, the last two paragraphs, the one starting in responding to a question will be taken under item 9, and the bottom paragraph, it was noted, will be taken under item 11. Is there anything else on page 38? On page 39? Page 40, just a report on item 56 that the election process is taking place currently, and I understand from Karen that there's been a significant interest this time, which is great. So we are hopeful that we'll be able to fill many of the membership vacancies that we've got on Schools Forum, which is really positive. Anything else on page 40? Page 41. Page 42. Just to mention, under the resolved item, halfway down, item 2, the information was emailed out to members on the 17th of March. So hopefully you've already received that information. Page 43. 44 and 45. Okay, thank you all for that. So I think it's over now, and Sarah is going to give the report back from Budget Working Group. Sarah, thank you.
Okay, hi everybody. So we had an education update from Jeremy Keeble. There was a question about the need for timely feedback from referrals and consults for both early years places and school places. And the group had a lengthy conversation about the availability of spaces and parental preference. Head teachers expressed their appreciation of the introduction to the termly local authority SEND focus meetings. We've had one so far. And head teachers also acknowledged the growing stability in the SEND officer team, which is beginning to bring more stability for every school setting. Head teachers also welcome the local authority offer of further training to complete and manage the consult process, to ensure rigour and accuracy in completing the paperwork. It's quite a mammoth task and an important task that needs to be carefully done. So that was welcome. Head teachers also asked a question about timescales to complete the annual review for primary pupils with EHCPs that were transferring to secondary school. And we did receive clarification that schools should aim to complete all annual reviews for Year 5 children by the end of the summer term and complete any remaining ones at the start of the autumn, ready for secondary transfer. We had an update on SEND. A question was raised about the funding of BASIS because they sit between special school and mainstream school. They do sit outside the funding matrix and contracts for these have been extended until August 22 and clarification that always the placement for these children will be through the SEND panel. There was a question about places for pupils with SEMH needs across the borough. Had we got sufficient capacity there? There was a question about, again, Year 5 pupil EHCP annual reviews, moving to the funding matrix, to the new funding matrix by September, in line with the annual review process ready for these children to start school in Year 7 at the beginning of September. There was confirmation that clarification would go out to all heads about that, so that in the summer term, when we do the reviews for children with EHCPs who are in Year 5, the reviews need to be completed and the new matrix needs to be considered at that point. And then we had an update on the DSG budget. A question was raised about the underspend across early years and the underspend across the service block. And a question was also raised about any additional SEND funding that was coming into the local authority, which has actually been factored into the recovery plan. So we had an explanation about that, but I think Laura will be able to give us more as we go through. And that was it. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you ever so much, Sarah. That was really great. Any other questions for Sarah? Thank you. No, I really appreciate the detail, Sarah, of that, and I know members will as well. So moving on to item 8, and I think it's over to Stacey.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. Okay, then, so this report is for information only for schools forum reps with regards to the budget setting process for 21-22. So this is the third report that I bring to you during the spring term, which just completes the annual consultation process that the local authority needs to carry out. So if I can just take you onto the second page of my report, just to give you a bit of an update in terms of the table there, table 1. At the point where we wrote this report, we hadn't had any update from the ESFA regarding any changes to the allocations. However, hot off the press today, we had an announcement over the weekend, well, it was end of last week, and we have been made aware of a 24k deduction on the imports and exports adjustments within the high needs. This is only indicative. We won't have the final confirmed high needs block allocation until the summer, so it is just a bit of an update for you really, but that literally is hot off the press. In the past, we have asked Forum to approve environments between blocks if we have any underspend within either early years or within the central schools block, and this year we haven't, so we're not asking for any environments there, so just wanted to point that out to everybody. So if I can just move you down my report then just to paragraphs 12 to 16, they set out the funding arrangements for pupils with SEND along with Appendix A and B to my report today. There is actually item 11 on the agenda tonight, which will talk through the consultation responses and the proposed changes for the funding matrix. So I won't go into any further detail with my report because I'll just duplicate. Looking at section paragraph 17 onwards, this looks at the funding arrangements for pupils in pupil referral units and also alternative provision. And paragraph 21, just to draw your attention to the fact that we're actually carrying out a procurement process at the moment with regards to commissioning of those AP places. The budget has been set for 21-22 on the basis of the current year's budget until that process is concluded in August 21. And no doubt there will be a future report that will be presented with the outcomes of those that consultation, that process. Okay, so if I move you on to the section that looks at the revenue grants. So just turn over a couple of pages. So the DfE have confirmed that pupil premium rates will remain as 2021. So there'll be no changes there. However, what they are doing is they're changing the census that drives that funding. So previously it used to be on the January census, and they're actually changing that to the October 20 census. So it's just to be for schools to be made aware of that really and the implications of that. As at today, still I'm not aware that the DfE have confirmed that the PE and Sports grant, the Universal Free School Meal grant or the Free School Meal Supplementary grant are to continue. We've had no guidance on that yet, so we're working on the basis that they will until they tell us that they won't continue. So, you know, we just need to watch this space on that one. So just if I can bring you down to paragraph 38. It's just to make you aware, just to point out, because with this report there's quite a lot of information in there, so just really to draw your attention to those things that have changed or not changed since last year, really. So in terms of the Teachers' Pay and Pensions grant, this funding now comes through the national funding formula rather than a separate grant, so I'm sure that schools have already spotted that within their allocations, but that's a new change for this year. And another grant that we wanted to identify was around the catch-up premium for the pandemic. Now, the COVID catch-up grant will be funded via 3 tranches across 20 to 21 academic year, and will equate to £80 per pupil or £240 per place. And as with the pupil premium grant, Ofsted will expect head teachers and leadership teams to be able to prove how they've spent this funding and to also demonstrate the impact that funding has made on that catch up for pupils that have missed education. So it's just to point out that to you. Moving on to the capital grants, the DfE have not yet confirmed funding allocations for devolved formula capital or for the school building conditions allocations. So the current year's allocations are noted in tables 3 and 5 for you there. But what they have released is indicative basic need allocations for 21 to 23, and those are noted in table 4 for you. So what we've got there is £6.5 million worth of funding that's coming into the local authority that will be allocated based on need and a matrix that colleagues in buildings and estates do allocate based on need of buildings. What we have then is just to confirm to you the section that references the special provision, the capital allocation there for SEND in table 6, is that we've got the £1.2 million worth of funding that was allocated previously to us. We were under the impression from the DfE that we would have to spend that by the 31st of March this year. They confirmed back in February that was not the case and that it was no longer time limited. However, the local authority is requested to update our local plans, and we need to republish those. But there are plans in place to spend the money. So again, it's just to make Forum aware of that. What the DfE also announced was some additional funding to support the delivery of new places from September 2022 and improvement of existing provision for those with SEND and alternative provision needs. We're not quite sure yet how much funding the local authority will get. You know, that hasn't been announced yet publicly, but we know that we'll get at least £500,000 based on the guidance that the DfE have issued so far. So again, we expect that we'll hear something soon about that. And that really, in a nutshell, are the main changes on the report. So any questions?
Yeah, we've got one hand up, which is Mark. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Stacey. Just a point on page 4, paragraph 19, Cherry Tree Learning Centre. A number of schools within my trust have recently received invoices for funding of pupils who are at Cherry Trees. Obviously, we question that with school, and the response has been that those charges were approved by school forum. I must admit, I can't remember that decision. It might be my memory is not as good as it was. But I just wondered how that, well, first of all, is that correct? And secondly, how does that link in with and sit alongside the 76 commission places, please?
Okay. I'm just wondering, I think Mrs. Howard's got her hand up. I'm not sure whether she was going to be responding to part of that.
Yeah. Hello. Good evening, everybody. I think we joined the trust as I think most people are aware. And I think when you first sought confirmation about the charging, the trust business manager actually mentioned about schools forum. It has never gone through schools forum, and it never needed to. So that was a mistake that I rectified with those of you who raised concerns with me via an email that it had gone through schools forum. That never needed to happen. The additional charging costs are weekly costs for the additional services that we provide for children above the £10,000 commission places, which we have shared with the local authority, and we've also shared with the regional schools commissioner. I think most provisions nationally, similar to our provisions, actually do charge for the extra services over and above the main education commission places that the local authority pay. And if anybody would like any further information about that, then obviously please email me independently and I'll be able to go over that again in more detail with you. So hopefully that's answered the question.
Thank you, Miss Howard. Is that okay, Mark, or is there anything else?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? If I can just ask you to take your hands down, those that have just spoken, that would be brilliant. Thank you. Miss Howard, do you want to come back again?
Sorry, I thought it's a legacy hand. I thought I'd lowered it. So, thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Hannaway, do you want to got a question?
Yes, it relates to the pupil premium funding, and I know that the decision is not a schools forum decision, but it was just a question really whether anyone in the local authority is going to work out how much funding we're missing. So we've already started to look at ours in school, and in that gap, what we would have had the funding for is £55,000. And I'm sure that will be replicated across lots of schools. So it's a question related to this, but obviously I don't know whether there's any plan to look at that.
Laura, I think you might want to come back on that one.
Yeah, sure, if I can. Thanks, Chair. Basically, we've had a consultation that we've had to respond to recently around pupil premium. And as part of that, we've had to estimate what the shortfall will be for the whole of the borough. So that includes academies and maintained schools. And we've sent that back. And the estimate that we came up with overall, which will include your school, it will include Gigmel, was £700,000. So that's gone off, and we've also sort of challenged and said to them, well, you know, it does depend on whether COVID has also had an impact on that. You know, it's difficult to say, but that's all been referenced as part of the consultation response.
Is that okay, Mrs. Hannaway? Is there anything else you wanted to come back on?
No, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, are there any other questions for Stacey? Okay, thank you, Stacey. Really detailed report again, and lots of information there for us to be taken on board. So item 9, which I think is the dedicated schools grant, and I think we're over to Laura.
Thank you, Chair. So this report is for noting again. So this is the DSG forecast outturn as at the end of January. So there's detailed narrative on pages 16 and 17 regarding the overall position, but I'm not going to talk through that detail. What I want to do is take you to the tables because those are more useful for you to see. So the table noted at Appendix A, page 20, details the split between maintained local authority and academy funding, and also reflects the overall cumulative deficit position of 12,450,000. So just to be clear, this includes the prior year deficit of 6,177,000, but it's after the in-year reserve contribution from the school-specific contingency reserve of 474,000. So I'll cover that as part of Appendix C because there's more detail around that later on. So Appendix B, page 22, shows the in-year deficit forecast of 6,273,000, and that's after taking into consideration the reserves. So this is split between funding blocks, and you can see that the high needs block reflects an in-year overspend of 6,462,000. This is mainly due to demand and increasing costs associated with the HCPs. Savings of 1.7 million are now unachievable. So just to note, that is a change since the last time we presented a report to Schools Forum. So that was the mid-year report that we presented back in November. And the reason for that is because the school reserve savings target, which was originally a target that was set of 750,000, which was agreed by Kath Knowles. But basically, following a detailed review, only 158,000 of that has been realised this year. So that's had an impact there on the savings targets that are now unachievable. However, the good news is that additional savings in year have been achieved as a result of placement reviews in the independent sector, placement delays due to COVID, and savings achieved via the alternative provision review. So obviously that's helped to mitigate against the fact that we couldn't achieve all the savings targets originally approved. Just to also note that there's been further placement delays since the time of writing this report. So there's further savings that aren't captured as part of January outturn. And we are it's approximately £300,000 in additional savings that we're estimating for the high needs block. So that's positive for us with the big deficit that we've got. For the early years block, it currently reflects an in-year saving of 171,000 with a cumulative saving of 1,261,000. So as explained at previous forum meetings, the position regarding the payments for 2, 3 and 4-year-olds to provision is very unclear and uncertain. So 2 weeks ago, the ESFA issued new guidance around census data collection for the spring term, whereby an additional census will be taken in May to establish whether the local authority are due any additional funding for spring term. Now, unfortunately, that data and information won't be available to us until the summer term, so it doesn't help with our year-end process, and it doesn't really help schools at the moment to predict. However, as soon as we get that information through, we will pass that on to schools. And just to let head teachers know that a formal statement will be issued by Donna Farnell shortly to all schools confirming this. So it won't just be Schools Forum representatives, it will be all schools. So a question was raised at Budget Working Group around the funding blocks. The question was, are the funding blocks treated separately within the reserve? And the answer to this is yes. For transparency, each funding block is held separately in the central DSG reserve. However, when reporting to central government, we report a total figure which incorporates all 4 blocks and any balance available from the school-specific contingency reserve at year end. So that brings me on to Appendix C at page 23. This provides a breakdown of the reserve, which reflects the brought forward balance at the start of the year of 638,000 and also reflects an estimated closing balance at year end of 518,000. Now, what's also included in that is a breakdown of the movement in year. And you'll see that the underspend that's previously been presented to Schools Forum for Growth Fund of 390,000 has been added to the reserve, but also the 474,000 that I referenced earlier has been taken from the reserve to support high needs pressures. So I just wanted to clarify that position. Also, just a reference for Forum members, that as part of the year-end process, there are school rates adjustments that take place right at the end. So obviously this is an estimated reserve position that is likely to change. So I just need to make you all aware of that. Helen has asked that I pick up the query from previous meetings regarding the £45,000 available within the reserve. Now, as the position has moved on significantly and there is more funding to be allocated, Helen has confirmed that there will be a separate report detailing this and plans for the reserve that will be brought to the June Forum meeting. I think that's everything I wanted to cover, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Laura? Mark?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Laura. I guess just for clarity, really, just so I make sure I fully understand this. So we currently have a outturn forecast of £12.45 million overspend, and that will be transferred into the reserve in future years.
That's
Am I
right.
correct in therefore thinking that will be effectively a savings target to achieve through future savings, in addition to the ongoing rate of spend?
That's right. That's right. And that's factored into the recovery plan.
Okay.
And the recovery plan that was presented, I think it was the November meeting, the last time that was presented in full, that's continually updated, and we'll be bringing that back to Forum to let you know where we are. The £70 million that was quoted as part of the consultation for SEND and as part of the consultation for disapplication, that's still there. So that 12.5 million will feature as part of that, yes, to be recovered in future years, unless we get a massive cash injection that you can only hope for. You know, that's we need to recover that deficit, yes.
Okay. Thank you, Laura.
Thank you.
No problem. Thank you.
Any other questions for Laura? Okay, thank you, Laura. Again, thank you for your report. So I think you're also doing item 10, which is the schools and early years finance.
That's right, thank you. So again, this is just for noting. So this is about the finance regs. So the regulations were laid before Parliament on the 21st of January and were effective from the 11th of February. So there is a very detailed appendix, Appendix A, that looks at the full explanatory summary. However, the narrative on page 25 pulls out the main points, and I just want to briefly go over those with you. So there's quite a lot of detail around teachers' pay and pension grants and how they've been rolled into the national funding formula. So funding was also ring-fenced as part of that within the high needs and central schools blocks to support the centrally retained teachers. So we'll be passporting that across to various centrally retained areas. The deprivation bandings have been updated in line with 2019. Now, it's been a while since they were updated, so we were very appreciative that that had been brought up right up to date. And the low prior attainment is based on 2018-19 academic year, and that is to acknowledge that there was a lack of assessment data in 2020 due to the pandemic. Now, this could mean that there's a funding gap as a result of this for those disadvantaged children. This question and challenge was originally raised by Rebecca Cox. So the local authority have responded to a separate funding consultation and noted this specifically, requesting whether the shortfall will be addressed by more COVID catch-up funding for the next academic year, or whether there'll be additional funding within the formula to account for this. Also, what I'd like to do is make head teachers aware that individual budget details for their schools, which includes a breakdown of each funding strand, will be sent out this week, and it will have an option in the email for heads to attend a workshop held by accountancy if they are interested, if there's enough interest from everyone, and also if they feel that they require it. So I just wanted to note that for head teachers. Growth Fund, which has been quite topical of late, has also been strengthened in the guidance. Now, this is already covered as part of our regular schools forum cycle, so we will be continuing that process as originally planned. And also there's an acknowledgement in there about correcting prior year adjustments in the funding formula. What they've said there is that they will have no bearing on minimum per pupil levels because they want it to be as equitable as possible. And again, the very last point that I want to just raise is around the amendment to hold public meetings remotely being a permanent option, and that will be picked up, I believe, Chair, on point 11 today. Point 12, sorry, point 12 today.
Thank you.
So there was a question raised at Budget Working Group around the increase in funding, which is noted in Appendix A, page 28. So it was confirmed at the Budget Working Group meeting by myself that the local authority did receive the increase in high needs funding for 21-22. But unfortunately, this has been already factored into the recovery plan. So I just wanted to make that clear for forum members. Chair, I think that's everything that I wanted to pick up. Thank you.
Rebecca.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to say thank you, Laura, for recognising that, because there is quite a significant funding gap for our more disadvantaged pupils. So thank you for recognising that and taking that forward. Thank you.
That's okay. I just hope that we're listened to, but we've tried to lobby central government. I mean, it wasn't just that response that we put in. We put in a lot of responses around, you know, setting a hard formula for high needs, trying to lobby more funding. So we're doing as much as we can from the local authorities' perspective.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for Laura on that item? Okay, so we move on to item 10, and I think Catherine is going to do an introduction and then Tony's going to finish. So over to you, Catherine.
Lovely, thank you. So picking up the point about high needs block challenges and our SEND needs funding matrix, and the current arrangements for funding the needs of children with SEND are out of date and just simply not sustainable. The current arrangements haven't changed since the 2014 Code of Practice came in, and we believe it's at least 10 years since there's been any change. So the Council's proposing to move from the current banded framework to a funding matrix for mainstream schools and academies and needs-led funding arrangements for special schools. We heard at the last Schools Forum that consultation had taken place between the 14th of January and the 21st of February this year, 22 responses to that, and there were 2 question and answer sessions with 25 participants, and the report sets out the responses. It is true to say that there were a number of very detailed questions that require a lot of consideration and response. So the original plan was to implement in full the new arrangements from the 1st of April. But because of the responses through consultation, we've got to get this right. We need to make sure the change is managed carefully and that there's proper training in relation to the matrix and guidance. Really important that this is transparent and there is a belief in an equitable approach. So we're now proposing to implement in 2 phases. Special schools place-led funding from the 1st of April and the mainstream needs-led funding from the 1st of September, so phase 2, which gives the team time to work through the training and the detailed guidance. The report covers the arrangements for that transition phase, but I'm now going to hand over to Tony, who is expert in this and will be able to cover the details. But I thought it was just important to set the context for this very important change. Thank you, Tony.
Thank you. Over to you, Tony.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Catherine, and thank you, Chair. If you just give me 1 second as I pull my, this is always the technical bit, isn't it? Oh, here we are. Right. Can everybody see that?
You just need to put it on.
White screen. Yeah.
Yes.
I think it's this one, isn't it? No. I've done.
You need to go to slideshow or go down to the bottom right.
Oh, there it is, slideshow. Yeah. From the beginning.
Yes.
Lovely. Thank you. Everybody can see that?
Yes, thank you.
Lovely, thank you. So welcome everybody. Thank you, Catherine, for that overview. I'm hoping that everybody has had an opportunity to read the report. I'm asking you all to note the content of the report today. So the proposed SEND needs matrix funding, as Catherine has said, highlighted, we had anticipated that we would implement everything from the 1st of April, but we really have listened to the feedback that's come back through the consultation from the 2 sessions that we did as well, and from our talking to schools, talking to parents, and from feedback from other colleagues. So I think the important thing is for you to know is that there will be 2 phases. So from the 1st of April, the needs-led funding for special schools will go ahead. The special schools have had their budgets and that they are satisfied with the way to move forward around their unique characteristics of those settings. And the second phase will be from September for all the maintaining the academies. And that's really based on us listening to the academies and to the primary schools about needing time and making sure that we get this transformational change correct in the way that we move forward. What will happen from the 1st of April is really key. So what we really want to ensure that you will we will continue with the banded framework until the 31st of August. So that will mean those young children that have already got exceptional funding, around 77 of those, they will continue in the summer term. So there should be no loss to any school going forward. What we want to do is use that summer term to do the reviews of all of those 77 young people under the new matrix to get them ready for the 1st of September. So they will only come in under the new regime from the 1st of September, but we want to make sure we've done those assessments. Any annual reviews that will happen naturally in the summer term will continue as normal. We don't want to stop our business, it's still business as usual, but we will be using the matrix, the new matrix, and gathering all the information, all the guidance ready for that to come into place for the 1st of September. So all annual reviews from the 1st of September will be in the new format. It will be the multi-agency panel that will make the determination of the final level of funding, but we really want to work with the schools through the summer period around that. We want to have some moderated approaches. So we will be talking to you about how that can be, what that will look like for you. Any draft EHCP that ends in the summer term will still be subject to the banded framework, but then the needs will then be subject to the new matrix from the 1st of September. Again, because we wanted to understand and listen to what the schools were saying, we wanted to get this right. And any emergency annual review that happens in the summer term, that you will have to provide evidence, and it will only be for a term. So there'll be no ongoing long-term exceptional funding that will be agreed, because the new matrix will come into play in the 1st of September. I thought what is important, that there were very detailed feedback from the consultation, and actually you could coalesce them around sort of 4 main areas. So there was lots of queries around the characteristics of the matrix, the descriptors and the points, and all of those our lead educational psychologist Dawn has re-looked at those and actually have updated the matrix as a result of that, and the points as well. They've all been looked at in relation to that. There was lots of questions about who will undertake the assessment of the matrix and how it will be moderated, and that's the reason why we think it's important to have a rota of heads and SENCOs that are attending the weekly SEND panel, so that you're part of the decision making. It's really important for us in SEND to make sure that there's ownership throughout the system around this sort of process. So we're hoping that heads and SENCOs will come on board, particularly from September, but actually we welcome you to come forward from the summer also. There's loads of questions around the level of funding assigned, given the mainstream nature of your setting, because you're not like a special school, and some of the young people have really complex needs. So there's loads of questions around those that we've taken into consideration, and that's been reflected again in the points and the descriptors in the matrix. And then there was lots of questions about how the current children on exceptional funding will be supported through transition, and that is where we felt that there was a need to ensure we did this transformational agenda really slowly to get it right, hence the reason for the 2-phased approach. So one of the key things is around the training. So the consultation feedback will be available after the 30th of March. We have got all our responses now. I'm just checking with legal the best way for this to be presented, because it's really quite detailed. There were loads of queries, so I just need to check with legal which is the best way to do that. A training schedule is being developed now with our educational psychology colleague to make sure that we're ready to roll this out through the summer, very much making sure that all the heads and SENCOs feel comfortable and confident about the matrix, but also that the SEND staff as well are able to support you. So the training is a really key factor to get this right. Further testing will continue over the summer, so we'll use that as a period to make sure that there is rigour in the system as well, because that was one of the things that heads were saying when we had our feedback sessions. It's really important that the SEND matrix is about fairness, it's about equitable looking at the needs equitably, but also it's around transparency. And I think for quite a while, because the matrix hadn't been updated for such a long time, that seems to have got lost, and we need to make sure we put that back on the table. And we're also making sure that there was supplementary guidance in the matrix and the guidance around that. So it needs to be needs-led, and we will be asking for evidence in order to make sure we're putting the young people on the right level, hence the reason for the moderated panel, to make sure that everybody is confident that we've made the right decision. Okay. So that's the end of my presentation, and because let me come out of here and show. Brilliant. Stop the presentation. Lovely, thank you. Right, yeah, I think because I had made the assumption that everybody would have read the report, I didn't really want to go through the report. I wanted to be able to visually just take out the highlights, but also to help you as heads make sure that you felt confident and satisfied about the way that we were going to move forward. So I'm really open to questions around the presentation, but also what you may have read in the report if you seek any more clarification. So, Chair, I'm open for any questions.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that, Tony. Are there any questions for Tony? I think silence is golden. So Thank you. That's clarified a lot of points I know for people in the room, I'm sure. And so thank you for the work that you've done on that.
Thank you.
So that takes us to item 12, which is future meetings of Dudley Schools Forum, which I think Karen is going to start us off on, and then we'll have a little bit of discussion.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So I briefly mentioned this at the last meeting, but the Schools Forum Regulations 2020 have been amended to enable Schools Forum meetings to be held remotely permanently, and Laura touched upon this in her agenda item. Also, the government's operational and good practice guide has also been amended, which I will circulate to members after the meeting. So I've placed this item on the agenda to gather any views or comments from Forum as to how you would like the Schools Forum to be arranged going forward. So the next meeting will be held in June, and not long after, hopefully we'll be able to hold face-to-face meetings. But I think we're looking specifically from September, October time. So I'd appreciate if you could let me know whether you'd prefer to meet as before in a venue or continue with Teams. I mean, none of this is set in stone, so it can revert back to either way. You know, I want the forum to benefit yourselves. So just welcome any comments, Chair.
Yes. So any comments initially from anybody? I think just a couple of comments from previous when we were discussing with the officers earlier to say, I know Karen mentioned that attendance has been significantly increased since we've been doing virtual meetings. I don't know whether that's something we need to consider. And I know we've made some quite significant savings by not having face-to-face meetings. But I'm sure some of us have missed not having that interaction with people. So, you know, it's really to get a feel for how you as members feel tonight, and so that we can plan ahead for the autumn term. I'm guessing there's no strong views as nobody's actually saying anything at the moment. Who have I got here? Stacey?
Right, thanks, Chair. Yeah, all I was going to say was just, I suppose, if we consider using virtual meetings in the future, I was just wondering about the start times, because I think the start times were always sort of 6 o'clock, because that helped people to get from, you know, previous meetings and drive across the borough and get to a venue. I was just wondering whether there was any scope that if we did go with virtual meetings, do we want to start those meetings at, say, 5 o'clock, so that people can finish earlier, if they have childcare commitments or other responsibilities. Just a thought really for consideration as well.
Okay, thank you, Stacey. So any views at all on this particular item? So I'm not quite sure really how to proceed with this then. Should we have so I suppose that the option is we stay with virtual, or we go back to face-to-face, or the third option would be possibly a combination. So if we could perhaps have a show of hands for staying with virtual, that would be good. Okay, Karen, I'm hoping you're doing some counting somewhere.
Yeah, there's 9. Yeah.
9, okay. And then what about, no, you'd like to go back to face-to-face? If you can just take your hands down. So face-to-face meetings. Okay. And would just 2? Thank you. And would anybody like to consider a combination of? So I think probably on what we've got tonight is probably to go with virtual from those numbers, Karen.
Yeah, I mean, I'll have a play around with the meeting schedule, Chair. I mean, I suppose one of the options could be is that the first meeting of that academic year could be held face to face. So just to introduce new members as well, maybe around the election process. But certainly we can, like I said before, it's not set in stone, so it can change. But I just wanted to get the
where members were at with it, but also as Stacey
Yes,
mentioned,
yes.
what about the change in time? If anybody,
would you like an earlier meeting if it was virtual? Would like to just show hands if you'd like. If we're going virtual, would you like an earlier start? So that seems quite a popular thought. Right, so perhaps if we could take back to the June meeting, where hopefully we might get a few more. Well, I know we're quite low on numbers. We've had a few apologies tonight, so excuse me. It may be that we can just come up with a final decision at the June meeting and then get prepared then for the start of the September term. But thank you. Yeah, that's been great. And then the final item then is to over to Catherine to give the Children's Directorate verbal update.
Lovely, thank you. I'll be very brief. 5 weeks in, lots of challenges in across the service actually. Finance is always a challenge. We're talking about that here in relation to DSG, but it's also a challenge from the council's base budget in relation to children's services. From a social care perspective, we remain under support and supervision from the Department for Education. We have a DFE advisor working with us, and we have a very detailed improvement plan to respond to the challenges in the system. And our next formal DFE review is on the 14th of May, where they will be looking to see what progress we've made in the last 3 months. We are expecting a full Ofsted inspection of social care sooner rather than later. Full inspections aren't taking place at the moment for social care. They're going to start again from the summer. So my current plan is to work for that from the autumn. I may be wrong, but I do feel it will be this calendar year. So lots of work for us to do that is underway. One of the things where we've made good progress is recruiting permanently to senior posts, so that's very positive. But we are at the moment struggling significantly with frontline workers. So frontline social workers in duty and assessment, which is the part of the system which identifies risk when we get contacts and referrals coming in. Our referrals have increased by 31% in the last month, which is over 300 additional contacts, so a significant additional demand. And we have a number of vacancies that we can't fill at the moment, even looking for agency staff. So big challenges. We're taking action to resolve that, but it is not an easy fix. We've also got vacancies in our early help service in targeted family support. So we are continually looking at how we can recruit, because clearly we need staff to be doing the work to safeguard and protect children. So continued focus in relation to workforce. From an SEND perspective, we remain with a written statement of action. We're 2 years into that, planning for re-inspection, and that's from Ofsted and the Care Quality Commission, and our next review from the DFE and NHS England is next week on the 7th of April, where we will be presenting progress made. So lots of challenges, lots of change, but certainly I have been overwhelmed by how positive staff are in the borough, even with those challenges. So lots to do, but a good basis to build from. Really happy to take any questions that anyone has. I'm conscious that sounds a bit gloomy, but I'm really not gloomy about the work we've got to do.
Thank you, Catherine. Is there any questions for Catherine? everybody's getting off very lightly this evening. Obviously want to get out into the evening daylight. So I think that brings us to the end of tonight's agenda. Just to remind you all that the next meeting is the 22nd of June. So thank you all for your attendance, and we look forward to seeing you in June. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you,
everyone.
Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.